One of the best, most versatile ways to decorate your pots is with stamps. They're not that hard to make, you just have to kind of think things through as you make them. And the biggest thing you have to remember is that everything is going to be backwards. Whatever you carve as negative space will become positive space, and whatever you leave as positive space will become negative space. So I think it's really helpful to draw out a design first, kind of like this, where you know exactly what is going to happen as things sort of invert. Your stamp will also be flipped horizontally. So anything that you do that requires text or an image that needs to be facing a certain direction, you've got to make sure that you do it backwards because it's pretty embarrassing when you mess this one up. Now, there's a couple of things that you need to keep in mind while you're making a stamp, so I'm going to show you a couple of different examples. This first stamp that's kind of like a sun is almost equally negative space and positive space. The blank that this was made from was carved into, which means that it's going to leave the shape of the stamp behind in the clay. This stamp here that's like a leaf is almost the exact opposite. The stamp was carved away and the image is what's left behind as positive space. This will only leave the image of the leaf behind without any sort of border. Neither of these types of stamps is wrong, but it's important to know what kind of stamp you're making so you know exactly what you're going to get with your final product. This is a very flat stamp with very fine, well-carved lines. This stamp displaces a lot of clay, but because the lines are carved so well, it makes a really nice image. If this stamp was much bigger, it would have a really hard time pushing into the clay because all that clay that you're pressing down doesn't really have anywhere to go. This last stamp is a bad example. The shape is obviously unintentional, and the lines carved in are not done well, so the desired result leaves some barbs and it displaces a lot of clay. It's really hard to push in, and overall, it just doesn't look very clean. But if we inspect this slab and you look at all the different stamp marks, you should be able to get a pretty good idea of the type of stamp that you might want to make and how to make it. You're basically either carving your image away or leaving your image behind and carving everything else away. I like to make stamps in two different ways. This one is a stamp with a handle, and it's actually got a stamp on either side. And then this one is just a flat stamp cut from a blank that was made from a slab that I rolled out. To make the first kind with a handle, I just roll a blank like this. And it is super important that the surface that you'll be working with is flat. The blank that you start with should be as perfect as you can make it so that the image that you carve into it can be nice and level. After I do this, I set this aside for a couple of hours to set up. And once it's at an early leather hard, then I start to carve. I know that this stamp is going to leave its shape behind, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it into a square, and you can be a lot more meticulous than I am here. But the whole point is to just be aware of the shape that you're leaving behind. Before I start carving, I like to double check that everything is as flat as possible, and then I'll do most of my carving with a needle tool, especially if I'm working with geometric shapes. They do a really great job of laying down a really straight line, and they just make really good, simple carvings. This is one of the things that I love about stamps. Your stamp does not have to be complex in order to achieve something really beautiful. Repeated patterns or stamps that are layered next to each other can look really nice, and it doesn't mean you have to be a master carver or incredibly good at drawing. This stamp is literally just 4 lines that get carved out, and the possibilities here are nearly endless. Rather than pushing a needle tool through clay and leaving barbs, I like to just lay it down flat and drag it through the clay. It leaves a perfectly clean line every time. The only thing you have to look out for when you're doing this is the thinner part towards the tip, and just make sure that you're getting the line thickness that you actually want. Like I said earlier, a really simple stamp can be repeated to create a really complex, beautiful design. You can do them in rows, you can do them randomly, or you can do my favorite technique, which is to repeat a stamp but rotating the stamp. This creates sort of a tiling effect that can look really cool, especially when you get some glaze on there. And make sure to test your stamping before you do it on a piece that you really love. Each stamp requires its own sort of pressure and angles. And if you're going for some sort of pattern, you definitely want to practice that pattern before you just go for it, because getting rid of these stamp marks is not easy to do. But you can sit down for an afternoon and make a whole bunch of these stamps and then spend hours trying different combinations of them and seeing exactly what you like and what you want to do on your pots. The other style of stamp, where you're removing everything except for the image, is a little bit more complicated, but can be a great time saver when you're trying to do things like making logos or an image that you want to repeat, but you don't want to have to carve it out 100 times. And I think that you would be amazed with some of the detail that you're able to pull out of something as simple as just carved clay. Now, this process is a little bit more in depth, but I'll show you how I like to do it. The first thing I do is I trace a printed image onto a slab of clay. And I do this just by laying the piece of paper on top of the clay and then going over the lines with a dull pencil. Be careful not to push so hard that you put a hole through the paper, and make sure that your clay is an early leather hard or a late plastic. You just don't want a lot of moisture getting onto your paper because then it can start to rip. But the tracing portion of this should be pretty simple. If you're having trouble holding the paper down, you can tape it down to your clay, because if you accidentally slip while you're holding your paper here, it is very hard to get those things lined back up. Now, I'm not going to show you the entirety of me tracing this snowflake because I think you get the idea. But once you're sure that you've gotten all your lines done, you can go ahead and peel that paper away. And what you're left with is a faint outline of what you need to carve. So my goal now is to carve away everything outside of those lines. The first thing I do is use a needle tool to carve right along the line. And then I'll use a hook tool or something a little flatter than a needle tool to carve away that excess clay. Take your time here and make sure that your outline is perfect. And once you've gotten all the way around your design, it should look something like this. And now we just need to carve away everything that is not a snowflake. But the important thing here is to carve everything down at a consistent depth. If some parts of your stamp are deeper than others, it's going to print strangely and you're not going to like your results. But then all you have to do is bisque fire your stamp and you're ready to start stamping. It took me about an hour to make that stamp, and now I can make as many snowflakes as I want. And honestly, I think they turned out pretty good. Bisqueware is really absorbent, and so clay doesn't stick to it very easily, so it really is the perfect material for stamps. Now, stamping into flat slabs is pretty easy, but I wanted to show you what it looks like to stamp into something that is cylindrical. And while this isn't nearly as clean, it does still work. You just have to sort of rotate your stamp around the cylinder as you press down, and definitely make sure that you are supporting from the inside of whatever you're printing on, because your stamp can crush your piece. The smaller your stamp is for something like this, the easier it is because you're displacing less clay. But a lot of this is just experimentation, so have fun with it, make some awesome stamps, and start stamping your pieces.